Greetings and salutations, all ye faithful Gentiles of the seven-headed golden trough. This is your friend and compatriot Jebediah Springsteen, back again from my long hiatus in the seventh circle of hell. It's the one with the gimp demons. But anyway, it's that wondrous time of the year once more. That time of the year where children are brought to your front door in little costumes and demand candy. I give them fire! Fire and razor blades that have snake poison on them hidden in apples. And that way I can get both highs. The high of knowing that I've disappointed a child on Halloween, and the high of knowing that when they do actually bite into that apple, they'll truly get a lesson on how to appreciate life. You don't truly appreciate something until it's taken away. And since this is Halloween, I suppose I should finish telling you that tale that I started telling to you last Halloween. You remember that night when the dead walked and I was dressed in immaculate 18th century clothing that I stole off some zombies? Oh, yes, those were the days. I was dressed in a magnificent periwig and a wondrous little overcoat. I was covered head to toe in blood, and I was joined by my good friend Christopher Mambatu, a 7-foot-tall, immensely muscular African male. I remember driving around on a Bentley, him mowing them down with an AK-47 or a machine gun or some sort of weapon that shoots lead at things. And either I or him were driving, I don't know. But anyway, I think I should start this story from where I finished it last time. I had crashed my Bentley and went flying through a paint glass window dressed as an 18th century nobleman. I then commented quite dryly on how stupid people were for dressing up in such ridiculous wear, while covered head to toe in blood and broken glass. The dead were closing in. They were coming through the broken window and through the doors, not all at once, one at a time. My heart sank, and I thought that this was the end. But my grief wasn't just for me alone. It was for my friend Christopher Mambatu, a 7 feet tall, extraordinarily muscular black man. He was unfortunately overwhelmed by the hordes of the undead. I remember him now, dripping sweat, muscular, covered in gore, swinging his 2 machetes, carving up the undead left and right, his blood-stained periwig leaning on one side. Oh, he put up one hell of a fight. But not even his sweet African flesh could withstand the hordes of the undead. And he fell. He fell and was swamped. But anyway, there I was too, prepared for death and ready for oblivion. But then I heard a mighty roar of anger and unbreakable spirit. I saw Christopher jump through the horde of zombies, swinging his machetes left and right. Heads of the undead flew everywhere. Blood and gore and guts and limbs flew everywhere as he powered through the horde of the undead. He then jumped through the window to where I was standing, covered head to toe in gore and bite marks. I asked him, how could you still be mortal? He turned and smiled at me, gesturing at the amulet around his neck with his machete. It was a circular pendant with a skull and crossbones inside of it, except the skull had a top hat upon it and was grinning, the sign of Baron Saturday. I smiled. Voodoo, obviously, because you're black. He then smiled, passed me a machete, and said, "Come on, white boy, we're getting out of here alive." I smiled back at him, and we proceeded to hack through the legions of the undead, making our way to the closest Chuck E. Cheese restaurant. For in any Chuck E. Cheese, all are safe from the hordes of the undead. Thus ran their slogan, 24 hours a day. It was later revealed that Chuck E. Cheese was the company that released the zombie virus into the population to increase customer attendance from the survivors. It was named the greatest marketing campaign in all of American history. The night ended with me and Christopher sitting upon the roof of a local Chuck E. Cheese, a barricaded Chuck E. Cheese, watching the sun go up. It was the most beautiful sight I've ever seen. The smoke from the burning cars and dilapidated buildings, mixing with the beautiful purple sky of the rising sun, and the moans of the undead, harmonizing into a wondrous cacophony of beauty. I looked upon this wondrous display of beauty and hideousness, and was amazed by its weird majesty. I then looked at Christopher, and he looked at me, and we kissed deep and long as the sun went up and bathed us in its holy light. We're married now, and I love that man. I love him with all my heart. I'm just sad that I can never give him children. Or can I? Next time on Gemini Springsteen, a live sex change operation in which I, Gemini Springsteen, shall perform said sex change operation on myself. Happy Halloween, children! Happy Halloween! Happy Halloween.
Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
Okay, well, on that note, hi everybody, welcome to a very special episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I am Sid Part 2, joining me today, as per usual, is Milan Jeftik1992, who apparently has a heart of hearts even though he doesn't have a heart, and Bill Worcester, aka Zazubar, the man who destroys cities for a living, and this is our Halloween episode! Hi guys, how's it going?
It is great.
I have done terrible things in honor of this grand holiday. Oh, guys, by the way, guess what? I am now a licensed priest of the Bloodstone Church in Innsmouth. I can now perform marriages and baptisms in the name of Great Cthulhu.
So you can marry. Fish people.
Oh yeah, I have
awesome.
like, I know I got this ceremonial robe, and that's why. Well, I'm still in Innsbruck now, so that's why my microphone is a bit old, because I'm just using their old World War II era one.
Right.
But yeah, I mean it's great. I am now completely whole. I have seen the dark, shrieking patches of chaos in the sky. I have fed on the flesh of an innocent, and I have come. I'm married now, guys. I've met a nice female thing, and
It's a thing. It doesn't have to be human. It's just a thing.
no, I'm pretty sure it's female, but I mean most of the
He's
ones,
not even sure.
No, well, like it's weird because they reproduce. They can change their sex like lizards, and so this is just. I don't.
Well, does it cook for you at least?
It screeches at me from the corner of the room.
Okay, well that totally counts.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Let's go one aspect of being a wife down.
Well, everyone, for this week's episode, or for this special episode, we wanted to come up with something that was going to be relevant to Halloween. And so I was pondering about it for a while, and I decided that a good topic to discuss would be monsters. Now let me just preface the video by saying one thing real quick. A while back we did an episode on horror, and a conclusion that we came to very early on was that monsters aren't as scary as people, because people are more possible, or if it's a person it's actually plausible, if it's a monster it's just not gonna fucking happen.
Right.
So, in this video, serial killers, axe murderers do not count unless they're on, like, Jason or Michael Myers level, where it's obviously not a human being, right? So that's the premise that this video will be based upon. Otherwise, we're going to be talking about monsters and seeing how this goes.
Well, that was actually something I was thinking about on the way over here today, because I was thinking how far can we stretch the word monster, and I kept thinking, well, I know what he's going for, so perhaps to make it more specific, we're talking a lot more about creatures than we are about monsters. So, and I would even say that Jason and Michael Myers get to the point where you can count them as creatures as opposed to,
if they do not obey the laws of reality, then, I mean, like,
right.
Patrick Bateman certainly has implausible luck, but it's still relatively human.
He's
nothing
not a monster, yeah.
Yeah, nothing he does is implausible to happen. It's just the sequence in which it happens is implausible.
Right.
But Michael Myers or Jason can get shot in the chest with a shotgun 17 times, point-blank range, and they just keep walking and stuff. So there's
something going on there.
Yeah, there's some supernatural element to it. But yeah, we're going to talk about creatures, and we'll get into bigger scale monsters as well, because I do kind of want to talk about, your giant monster fights and stuff like that.
Indeed. There's a lot to cover here.
The thing with monsters, there's always kind of a sense of fun. Sure, when you're a much younger man or child or prepubescent, monsters seem all that more real because your mind hasn't really distinguished fully what reality and fantasy are. They're still kind of interconnected somewhat. But when you're an adult, reasonably an adult, and your brain fully develops, and you manage to decipher, fantasy from reality, monsters just kind of become fun. They're like, yeah.
I think about 12 to 13 is the age that starts to happen at, because the guy that played Freddy Krueger, Robert Englund, okay. Yeah, he talked about how a lot of 12 and 13-year-olds would come up to him and ask, could you take Jason, could you take Michael Myers in a fight? And he said, yeah, that's something that has always been around. So it's like, I think about that age, you're still, like, really interested and like, somewhat scared by the concept of monsters, but you're beginning to get to the realm where they're fun and they're cool.
Yeah.
And I think that's about the age that it starts to divvy up.
Well, you think about it this way, 12 or 13 is around the beginning years of high school, and the closer you get to high school, the more psychologically active and psychologically aware I think you become. Because
that's middle school, Bill, but okay.
Here's a little...
Yeah, you're right. But still, it's close enough. I mean, junior high. I think that's the age where you start to become aware of these, serial killers and these human atrocities. And at that point,
real world horrors tend to enter your field of vision.
Right.
Because you're not sheltered from it as much anymore.
Right, because they're like, well, he needs to start learning since he's entering, being a teenager. I think, though, one thing I want to say now, because it's relevant to what we're talking about, and of course I agree that oftentimes the scarier field of horror comes from realizing what humans are capable of, and that's the terrifying thing, because it's like we can identify with it. And I'll say this, actually, to amplify that point. I think the most interesting monsters, the most interesting creatures, oftentimes, for me to be really interested in them, have to have a faucet of humanity inside of them. I look at my two favorite monsters of all time, Godzilla and the Wolfman, and I go, the thing that makes them fascinating to me is that both of them have an aspect of humanity into them. Godzilla was created by man, and the Wolfman is, half man. So
so basically, they're somewhat anthropomorphized.
Well, not even that. Not even on a physical level, but just on a character level. That kind of translates into them being more interesting because, again, you're seeing what... And, of course, it's fantasized here, but you're seeing what humans have turned into. And that... Or what humans have created in Godzilla's case. And that makes it more interesting because you're like, holy fuck.
So basically, they're subtextual representations of things that already exist in reality, but
right,
they're more Yeah.
They're fantasized. They're exaggerated. Which is of course the bane of allegory. And I always find that more interesting because it's weird because a lot of horror doesn't work if there's no ground in humanity. And even in monsters cases, that's true because if there's no ground for humanity, it becomes very formulaic. You look at a movie like Jaws. What makes that movie worth watching is not the shark going around killing people. And we reviewed this on the show when we talked about the most interesting aspect, and that would be, the human characters, Quint especially. If that movie did not have those three guys in that boat, it would not be remembered the way it is, because that's what makes that movie interesting. It's not the shark going around killing people.
Bill, yeah, the stronger point to make for your argument is Jaws is remembered because of the interesting human characters, and when you have a movie where it's just a shark going around killing people without interesting human characters, it's not remembered. Case in point, Jaws 2, Jaws 3, Jaws 4.
And all the other shark movies that spawn from it.
Yeah. The thing with that is, with most horror movies, if there isn't a relatable human character for the audience to latch onto, the hero, the villains, the monsters, the things you should be afraid of, kind of become the default protagonist. Because if you don't give a fuck about the people you're supposed to give a fuck about, and all you're just waiting for is to see the bad guy butcher them horribly, then the monster kind of loses its scary factor, because you want to see the monster just butcher these young adolescents horribly. With
I'm just saying, I agree with you there, Milan. I go to a Jason or any of the modern horror movies. If I go to the theater, I'm sitting there waiting to see how long it takes to kill somebody, and that's why I actually really enjoyed Michael Bay's take on Friday the 13th. Because the first 10 minutes of that movie is just the fucker killing kids. And it all happens. That's the best opener to a slasher flick I've ever seen, because it starts out oh, here we go, stereotypical slasher flick. And then in 10 minutes, 5 people are dead brutally on screen. And as a girl's running away from the guy as he's holding a fucking machete, it goes, Friday the 13th. I'm like, that's a brilliant opener for this type of movie, because that's what you actually want in the modern context.
Well, that's the thing. In that case, sure, they become kind of fun pop culture icons, but they lose their monstrousness. They just kind of become, kind of people's venting machines of, trying to get rid of their more homicidal urges.
It is every American's right to buy a jumpsuit and a machete and go kill teenagers in the woods. Okay?
Yeah.
The Second Amendment says so.
That's why
You got all political on your asses.
This is why I genuinely appreciate the Americans. That's the only thing I appreciate of Americans, is because
Thanks, Milan.
they give me the freedom to do terrible things.
Yeah.
And it's constitutional. It's great.
Well, what I think you're losing with what we're talking about here is context in a way, because without the context of the humans' reaction to the monsters, because you don't give a fuck about them and their reactions aren't that interesting, you just wait for those little scenes where the monster is doing something, and that makes the rest of the movie very boring and leads to you forgetting about the movie. And again, it not only takes out the horror aspect, but again, it also takes out being an emotional film, because while it might not be scary, the impact of the monster is still going to be drastically increased, and again, make for a better movie if the human characters' reactions to it are believable and, again, interesting. So each person can't just have the same look of horror on their face when Jason slashes a guy's head off. You add some unique characterizations in there to be like, oh, so this, let's say a soldier watches that happen. Instead of just having a look of horror on his face, maybe he tries to, he jumps in to try and stop this from happening. You add those little unique faucets into your story, and it makes your monster maybe not more scary, but more interesting. And again, that's the key thing with monsters for me, is how interesting they are.
Fair enough. For me, actually, the thing that matters the most about a monster movie, it's just probably because there's so few good monster movies out there in the modern context that have interesting characters. for me, what draws me to a monster movie is the mythos around the monster.
That's a really important thing as well.
I love Predator because it's just so interesting to think about, like, the particulars that make that monster, quote-unquote, work.
Right.
I really like Freddy because it's just such a fascinating idea, and I like the backstory. I mean, Nightmare on Elm Street 3 probably has one of the most horrific scenes in that it sticks in your mind just so well. And it's the origin of Freddy, in that his mom was a nun who was taking care of patients in a mental asylum. And they'd lock, like, all these fuckers in a room together over a weekend while they, like, went out and did shit. So, like, they'd lock all the fuckers in a room together, all the mental patients. And one day, the nun that ended up being Freddy Krueger's mother got locked in that room with them because no one noticed her. And they all raped her the entire weekend. Oh. And she survived and had Freddy Krueger.
Oh my god. Oh yeah, you told me.
And that's why Freddy Krueger is the bastard child of 1,000 madmen. And it's just such a... Like that scene is just so fucking creepy to see.
Also, to have the subtitle... Right.
Hold on. That is the bastard child of 1,000 madmen. That should be my origin, but
I really like that line because what I've begun saying, like, this is my quote. If Philosophy Quotes on Twitter ever is to quote me, the quote they will use, I promise you, is philosophy is Freddy Krueger, the nightmarish bastard child of 1,000 madmen.
That's the thing with this is my perspective. See, monsters become funny when you give them a backstory. If you genuinely want a scary monster, sure, you can kind of come up with a really creepy backstory, but after a while you get used to it. But if you continue with the element of mystery with your monsters, they kind of maintain their level of, well, oddness and otherworldliness. They are still kind of creepy. I guess that's part of the way why like, I love H.P. Lovecraft, and that's why most of his stuff still actually works, because there's very little stuff that you know, and that's why it's so creepy, because shit is just happening, and there's just
that's what makes Lovecraft unfilmable, is because so much of it is meant to be in your head.
Right.
Like, I've been listening to The Colors Out of Space over and over again this past week, because I'm going to be writing a paper on it soon about how he plays with rationalism and empiricism in that. And, like, a lot of what he says is stuff, it can't be described. It can't be described, is a phrase H.P. Lovecraft uses a lot. Mm-hmm. And actually, Milan, I'm glad you brought H.P. Lovecraft up. I knew you would. I'm really getting into H.P. Lovecraft because he uses the written genre of horror to incredibly great effect. I don't think I've ever read anybody that's done it better. Mm-hmm. And I've read Dracula, and I've hated Frankenstein.
For a stupid reason.
Don't care, still don't like it.
Because it rips off Dracula, even though Dracula was written almost 100 years later.
See, I don't care. It's still boring. It still comes off the exact same way to me. And as you've said, a lot of it's skippable, Bill.
Oh, yeah, no, I agree with you, but that was your major complaint with it, and I was like, that's not valid.
I was under the impression that it was written after Dracula, so I'll take that complaint away. I still didn't like it.
It's a lot of it is difficult to get through. Here's...
You know, I've read a lot of the great horror novels, and I've read up on a lot of, like, classic, scary stuff. I've gotten into a lot of horror in different ways, and I gotta say, H.P. Lovecraft probably delivers it the best. He's never scared me. There's only one real thing that, like, freaks me out, where I have to put a book down, and work to power through it, but, he does a really good job of playing with the ideas there.
One more thing, I know I told you the story before, but I want to bring a schizophrenic's view of monsters. You see, as a kid, not like as a late teenager, I was suffering from mental illness, and I used to, for my lack of any sort of better judgment, I would listen to audio recordings of H.P. Lovecraft stories in the middle of the night because I wasn't able to sleep. And just me being mentally ill, the layers, the walls between fantasy and reality were so thin that at some point I couldn't stop listening. I was literally hallucinating, like not seeing actually hallucinations, not seeing terrible things, but it's like when I was listening to Call of Cthulhu, I felt the presence of Cthulhu as though something gigantic, almost incomprehensibly huge in concept, was crashing through multiple realities to get to me. And yeah, I had to stop because I had to stop thinking, because the sheer idea, the sheer terror of what Cthulhu was, at that time I thought that maybe I was opening up a portal to another world, because that's the thing. Once you're mentally ill, you still have the mind, the fantasy and reality judgment of a child. Those two walls, there isn't, the wall between separating those two things is very thin. And so monsters kind of have this base in reality, at least in your head, when you're mentally ill. And so they become much more terrifying, because you don't know, like you know, at some rational part of you knows that this is not real, this is fantasy, but another part of you, that sick part of you, still refuses to accept this. That like I know that there's no Freddy Krueger, I know there's no Cthulhu, I know there's no horrible things, but you know, another part of you just says like, no, it could be true, and that's the most terrible part. Especially with Lovecraft, since he, you know, incorporates such vaguely, he likes to interweave.
He lets you fill it in.
Yeah, right. He lets you fill it in, but he also interweaves bits of truth with the lies, and that's why, you know, for a person who isn't really used to that, it adds a whole new level of legitimacy to something that ultimately is rather silly.
Right.
Well, not silly, but yeah, it makes the insanely creepy. Yeah, it makes the fantastic seem real. And
exactly.
When, like, I still don't believe that, like, I've read Dracula when I was insane, and that creeped me out, but not to the level of Lovecraft, because either that man had just an insane insight on the sick mental mind, because he hit every point of horror for me while I was
well, like,
insane.
I'll tell you this much, he's painfully aware of certain concepts in philosophy, and he plays with them to great extent. Like, there's this idea of philosophy called the theory of mind, where you realize that you're a thinking thing, and that other people are thinking things as well. You kind of just take that for granted now, but it's a very profound thing when you first get a hold of it at a younger age. He had a very fun, he played with that a lot, of the ideas of empiricism. Empiricists say that we're born blank slates, and everything we know through our senses. So Lovecraft really liked to play around with the idea of something that no one has ever sensed before in the entire history of humanity, and thus there is no way to describe what the character is experiencing. And that is a very strange idea that empiricists left a hole in their problems with. And he actually takes a really cool way of blending empiricism and rationalism. Rationalism is innate ideas. We know things pre-programmed into us by God, essentially. He takes empiricism and rationalism, plays with them in really interesting ways, and it's a fascinating amount of work the man puts into it. He's painfully aware of these concepts in philosophy and science, of course, that he pulls the strings of.
I think that he uses one of the key things in horror fiction to great effect, the idea of, you know, mystery, and again, the human mind is a lot scarier than any monster you could describe. And I think that that's why a lot of monster movies, I'm included in this, the one I made, they don't show the monster, at least they don't show it right away, because again, what you think it looks like is going to be a lot freakier than what the makeup guy can make it look like. So a lot of horror movies will use that to varying degrees of success. And I think, oddly enough, this isn't a horror piece of fiction per se, but it did use this and it worked well. The first season of Lost had some really scary scenes in it. With what we learned as what we learned would become the smoke monster. When we didn't know it was a smoke monster, we just thought there was something on this island. And these shots they would do, the noises they would have it make, and the way it would interact with its environment, you were just like, "What the fuck is this thing?" And it would freak you the hell out. I remember watching that season and having to look away just because I was so freaked out by what my mind was thinking it looked like. And a book, a piece of fiction that I think used that concept to, explore some ideas about, the human condition was Lord of the Flies. Lord of the Flies had an entire subplot in the book that was all about that idea of the human mind is a lot scarier than any monster, because there was this thing in the book called the Beast. And all the kids on the island believed in this thing, and there were parts of the book where they described what it looked like and what it was doing, but they were all different. And again, it was pointing out that, these kids are terrified and they're trying to survive on their own, and they're looking out in this forest, and just these, they're describing this terrifying vista, and again, it's totally not true. Yeah, but it's that perception that's scary.
Yeah, that's the thing. With Lord of the Flies, it had also really interesting commentary on religion. How it's basically, they kind of create their very own little tribal religion with the beast. The beast being nothing more than just a pilot who's been shot down. And they actually go and investigate, but being children, they see a dead corpse, and it being like a guy with the parachute with the wires stuck in the trees, charred. So it's just the wind shakes the wires, and the thing looks like it just gets up. And the kids' minds play tricks on them, and they think, "Oh my God, it's alive!" And they actually start. They almost sacrifice a kid to appease the scary monster in the woods. Well, they kill a pig and sever its head and then worship it, for fuck's sake.
Right, Lord of the Flies comes from that scene. Yeah.
That is the scene.
What happened?
That is the thing. That is Lord of the Flies. Just
right.
Terrible things. But the thing is with me, I've learned, like, being mentally ill, I had to learn to completely detach myself from terrifying situations, because if I let this wall break, if I let this fear consume me, then I have to completely rationalize the thing away, because it's almost become like a second nature to me. Like, I don't get scared very often, and when I do, that's because my mental faculties are deteriorating to the point where it's like I know when I'm scared. I know, like, I gotta get my shit together because I'm scared now that something is wrong. My mind is deteriorating, and so that's the point. Fear has kind of become. I don't fear fear. It's just become something that's dangerous in itself.
Right, because your mind doesn't know how to cope with it naturally.
No, it does. Yeah, it doesn't. It didn't know how to cope with it naturally, but I taught myself to cope with it. That's the thing, because if you don't have that natural distinction between fantasy and reality, you gotta make one. You gotta build up that wall and make it hard, so the monsters on the other side don't.
Sorry, Milan, to cut you off, but just before this joke is completely irrelevant, I have to make it. The only thing Milan has to fear is fear itself.
Indeed.
And spiders.
I don't fear spiders. I used to fear spiders. Now I don't. And I live in Australia.
Well, Milan, it's interesting you talk about having to build that wall between fantasy and reality yourself, because we were kind of talking about it earlier, in that most children have that wall constructed for them by their parents and by their school. Their educators and their parents try to build this wall so that way they don't become, irrational people who don't know the difference, because then that's someone who can't really function in society. So I definitely had that done for me, so I can't even imagine what it must have been like to try and try and build a wall between you and Cthulhu, so to speak, to say it's not real, trying to convince yourself over and over again. It's such an alien concept.
Well, Bill, we know that the seawall is a complete farce, that it doesn't offer
we know that doesn't work, but I want to know about the wall.
But anyway, it's funny, you just reminded me of a scene from Raising Hope that I really liked. So it's this little kid, and he's watching a television show with his grandmother. And there's like a scary wolf monster that comes on the show for a minute or two, and the kid just hides underneath his covers as soon as he sees it. His grandma says, "You see him? He lives in my jewelry drawer." Just to keep the kid out of certain areas of the house, she'd tell him that he lives there.
That's interesting.
So I could see Milan's parents doing that.
Well, that's actually kind of interesting. Did you guys have your own private boogeyman? Because I know a lot of different states and a lot of different countries have their own version of the boogeyman for kids, and I know I had a one or two. Did you guys have your own specific boogeyman?
Nah.
Personally, when I was a very young kid, when I was living in Moscow with my great-grandmother, I had this ability. Well, I had this ability all the way through when I was insane. But it's when my ability to control my dreams. What was it called?
Oh, lucid dreamer.
Lucid dreamer. I was able to do that, but once I became reasonably sane, the ability kind of faded away. But I gotta try and get that back. But
I can teach you how to do that.
Oh, that's good. I know how to do. I used to lucid dream all the time when I was a kid.
No, I can teach you how to train yourself to do it.
That's relearn. That's great. But when I was a kid, Freddy Krueger was everywhere on Russian television. He was selling Coca-Cola. He was in Russian kiddie shows.
Wait.
Only in Russia. Only in Russia.
Jebediah Springsteen versus Freddy Krueger. It'll be amazing.
Anyway, but basically, I remember dreaming as a kid, and him chasing me with a whole bunch of other monsters. And that's the thing. I even when I was a very, very young kid, I had to. This ability was kind of wormed out of me by the church, but I didn't know he was a child killer. It was just a scary burnt man with claws for hands. And so I kind of sat him down in my dream with a bunch of other monsters and kind of played, psychologists and had them explain to me their problems, and we became friends, and they didn't bother me again.
That's nice.
Yeah.
It's good of you to do, Milan. It's a good community service for Freddy Krueger. Well, I know you have these different, tall tales of these creatures that adults keep scared.
If you want to hear the Russian boogeyman,
I would love to hear the Russian boogeyman.
Well, the Russian boogeyman, it's weird because Russia has some boogeymen, but they're really just kind of fairy tale creatures. Right. And they are pretty grotesque if you really think about them, like the character of Baba Yaga.
Oh God! I heard this.
I haven't heard this. Please describe it.
Baba Yaga.
In intricate detail.
Oh,
No. He's doing a reading of the story. It'll take entirely too long to describe.
It's
very.
Just give me your own.
I might as well. Basically, she's a cannibalistic witch that lives in the woods, and she has a house and giant chicken legs that walks around the woods. She also has a fence made out of human bones and children's bones.
Right.
And she, on each, fancy post, she has a skull with glowing red eyes in it. And she's a cannibalistic witch that lives in the woods, and she has some ties to Slavic mythology of being the goddess of death. And there are other parts, other myths where she turned into an old hag in wintertime, and in summertime she would, transform into a beautiful blonde maiden that would, tempt men into the forest and then kind of eat them, rape them, have sex with them, and then kill them more. And
she has some.
Oh yeah. And then
a half chicken witch woman.
No, she's not half chicken. Her house is half chicken. Her
house is half chicken.
Yeah, her house is on giant chicken legs.
Did we just lose Ian?
I don't know.
Ian, you there? So we.
Sorry, I'm blowing my nose.
Oh,
Okay.
okay. Oh, his mic is being muted. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, that's the thing about Baba Yaga. She's kind of become like the go-to fun kitty villain in Russian cartoons. Just like, oh, it's Baba Yaga, kids. Kind of what Dracula has become nowadays. Like he's no longer
interesting.
He's no longer
Right.
scary.
Right. I mean, when I was a kid, there's so many different ones in America that it gets to the point where different families kind of make their own. And being a family who went upstate a lot with my extended family, my uncle Ken, we came up with this story that none of us ever really believed, but he would freak us out with it because he would tell these detailed, fucked up stories about it, of this thing called the Moose Man. and now let me just point this out. There ain't no moose in upstate New York. We have large deer, and that's about it. We don't even have bears around where I am. It's a very safe area where I am up there. And we would be driving home at night from the different towns, the bigger towns that you would go to, that aren't actually in the mountains, and then you would drive back to the house. And on these drives back to the house at like 11:30 at night, it's pitch black. You got your high beams on. You're driving down country roads. He would just tell us these stories about the Moose Man, like fucking. And it was really fucked up because he wasn't just going around killing people. He was like shitting in people's cars and shit. He was like, it was just fucked up. And this continued for years. And it got to the point where I had gotten a lot older, and I would start telling these stories to my little brother, and it became kind of this tradition where the Moose Man legend was passed on from Worcester to Worcester. So I'm going to try and freak my kids out with that one day. See if...
Bill thinks he's going to have children.
Well, Ian, I didn't buy that fake uterus for nothing.
Well, I'm sure there's
disgusting.
I'm sure there's some female out there in the world that's willing to have Bill's penis inside of her.
Hold on, we talked about this. We're not going to talk about human monsters. We're only going to talk about fiction.
Well, Bill, I can set you up.
So nice.
Bill, I can set you up with my new wife's, sister if you want. She's vaguely human looking.
Well, I don't want to fuck Cthulhu's stepsister.
Well, no, she's not stepsister. She's just kind of far off cousin.
Right.
But she has breasts, like 16 of them.
Right.
And
she overcompensates. She's an overachiever.
Oh no, she's rather nice. She shrieks in a very sexually arousing way, or is that fear? I don't
Actually, you know what? While we're on Cthulhu again, if you don't mind, there was one thing I just wanted to bring up, and I thought I'd lost the chance, but that's okay because it's not entirely important. But this will actually get us to something else I wanted to talk about tonight. All right, so I'd never seen Cthulhu's design until South Park started doing it, and then, he exploded in popularity, which is cool. But Bill, you're a bigger giant monster fan than I am. Have you ever seen a monster design like Cthulhu before?
You mean just similar in overall design characteristic?
Like a giant monster that had a squid for a face kind of thing.
There's a movie that came out fairly recently called The Mist. And I'm sure you guys have at least heard of it. Where it takes place...
Has it got Tom Welling in it?
I don't think so.
Okay.
It takes place in a grocery store, and what happens is a big cloud of mist comes into this mountain town, and the whole movie takes place mostly inside this grocery store, and it's these people trying to survive, and it's got a very Lovecraftian atmosphere about it, though I think the book was written by Stephen King, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh yeah, Stephen King's a huge Lovecraft fan.
I'm not sure if he wrote the book, though. That's what I'm trying to remember. Anyway, it's not
I figured, though, that
it's a short story.
If it's newer or if it's Western, I figured it's probably inspired by Lovecraft. I'm just wondering if you've ever seen a giant monster.
There's a creature in that film that looks a lot like Cthulhu at the end. They don't show a lot of the creatures throughout the film, but once they, when you get to the end and they get in the car and there's that very infamous scene now with the gun, there's this scene where this giant creature walks over the car and it looks a lot like Cthulhu. You can definitely tell it was inspired by it. But giant, I mean, like kaiju, I suppose, that look like Cthulhu. I mean, not really anything specific. I mean, of course, you've got your fair share of giant octopuses showing up in Godzilla movies and such and Toho films, but not really a Cthulhu-looking thing.
Yeah, I was just wondering about that. It just occurred to me. It was such a unique design. I've never seen anything like that before or since, and I figure anything modern is probably inspired by Cthulhu. Like, I mean, you had the Pirates of the Caribbean movies that did the like Davy Jones, and you had the Kraken, which are kind of both sides of it. One's the giant and one's the biped. But yeah, it seemed like a very unique design and a very imaginative thing, and I wanted to use that to kind of branch off into like the designs and the ways and similarities and differences that monsters are displayed.
This is my zone, man.
The thing with the Cthulhu, he was actually designed by Lovecraft. Well, not really designed, but described in his story in the 1930s. And if you think about it, it's so ahead of its time. It's like that's the thing with monsters with the designs is that you gotta hello.
I'm here.
You guys still there? Oh,
Ian muted his microphone again.
Oh, right.
Sorry, like, are you guys getting a noise when I do that or something?
Yeah, we can tell. It just cuts off all your background noise. Don't worry, it's fine. We can handle it. It's fine.
Okay.
Well, I'm trying to get rid of background noise.
Okay, sorry.
Don't worry about it. It's cool. Anyway, Mullen, continue.
And the thing with designing monsters, you really got it for original monsters at least. All the classic monsters are just old. Like it's the people mining their most private and most basic of nightmares and fears. Like
I'm sorry to cut you off, but can I go back to an older point really quick before we get into this? Because there's something I want to say going back to an old point. Because it's going to become irrelevant. I think the big problem with stuff that would borrow from Cthulhu before the advent of CGI is doing an octopus is really fucking hard.
Oh yeah.
If you go back to the first movie that did a really that used a giant octopus in a monster movie, you go back to King Kong versus Godzilla, or even films like The Beast from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Of course, you do stuff like stop motion and animatronics. But with King Kong versus Godzilla, they used an octopus, and they blowed hot air on it in order to get it to move the way they wanted to. And in order to do something like Cthulhu, you'd have to, if you were going to do a Godzilla style, do a rubber suit, you'd have to have it where the tentacles don't move, and that would look really fake. So I think the reason why we just never saw it happen, at least in classic monster movies, is just because of the difficulty of doing an octopus. Now
the thing with that actually, if you've seen this old black and white, it's not old, it's actually a new black and white film. It was done by the H.P. Lovecraft Appreciation Society. Yeah, call it Cthulhu.
Yeah, I was about to bring that up.
And if you look at the and if you really kind of take Cthulhu's moving tentacles in stop motion, see, stop motion is kind of odd and otherworldly in its own right. And if you kind of, it kind of works for Cthulhu because since
it looks alright, yeah,
it looks really kind of good because it's kind of disturbing looking. It's like it's not moving like normal things. But no, I'm gonna get back.
I don't know why, but recently I've become obsessed with Godzilla fighting Cthulhu. It's just such a cool idea.
Been obsessed by that.
No, like at first, back when we did the H.P. Lovecraft video, I just meant it as a joke. But the more I think about it, it just sounds so fucking cool.
Yeah, there's been a lot of fan fiction and fan art based around Godzilla fighting Cthulhu. I mean, it would be cool. Milan, I wanted to ask you this because I've been thinking about it. Is Cthulhu public domain?
I think so. I think Lovecraft's copyright has expired.
Right. I mean, I thought so, but I wasn't sure.
Anyway, I'm gonna get back to this point before.
Sure. I'm sorry I cut you off. I just wanted to bring that up.
Oh, it's fine. It's fine. The thing with classic horror movies like vampires and werewolves and whatever, they're just basically their old world fears, brought into reality. Like vampires are disease and sexual perversion, and rape and death and all that stuff. Werewolves are kind of the fear of the monster inside, all that stuff. See, all Satanism, these old Satanism, all these old monsters have are basically spawned from the old fears of the old world. But Cthulhu and modern monsters, see, modern monsters isn't really much variety in the type of monster nowadays because everything's kind of derived from the old world. I'm sure there's like, modern day examples of the crazy computer, but that can, it only works if you have a good writer. But with Cthulhu, it's a very interesting idea because it comes from, well, Lovecraft really he was asexual. I mean, his wife says that he was really good in bed, but he was just kind of afraid of genitals.
I love how someone asked that question of his wife.
Yeah, no, yeah,
someone thought to ask that.
She said he was a really good lover, but he was just kind of not. He was asexual. He was completely not interested in not boys and not girls. But that's the theory. But he hated seafood, and there's something he always sees something. So he kind of, if you want to play armchair psychologist, there's this weird combination of like, hey, this fear of sex and this fear of fish kind of combining into this weird subconscious, unnameable thing. And this concept is really well explored in Alan Moore's Neonomicon, which I reviewed for my Melange Eptic's Halloween Spooktacular. The episode is up
plug.
I'll link it in. No, but it's actually...
Blood, you've got to go put on lipstick and a dress now and walk the streets.
Yeah,
I do that all the time, man. That's my third job, by the way.
Yeah, see, what's going to happen is we're going to get a spin-off of Geeky Gentlemen. It's going to be called Geeky Ladies. It's going to be Haley and Nicola and Milan in drag.
Oh yeah, we talked about this the other night.
Basically, it's the thing. There isn't really, like, there are writers out there who are coming up with newer types of monster, but they're still kind of riffs on the originals. Like, it's some sort of vampire, it's some sort of werewolf, it's some sort of Cthulhu thing.
I'd posit that Freddy Krueger is probably one of the most original monsters in quite a long time.
Oh yeah, but the thing with that,
he's gotta remember his influences though, because he's kind of based on the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari.
Not really. He's kind of based more on Japanese horror lore.
Well, a dream killer, which is what Caesar, which is what the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari is, and also something from Chinese mythology, which got incorporated into the Godzilla franchise with King Caesar. And guess what? You have to wake him up to fight Mechagodzilla. So, it's an idea. The idea of a dream killer has always been prominent in horror, and I think it's always been one of the ideas where a lot of writers will use it, but they don't use it well because they do it in a very generic way. They'll do...
You know what a really great original monster is that I don't think I've ever thought of before, but I totally want to see on screen now since we only got a brief glimpse of it?
Yeah.
The fucking merman from Cabin in the Woods.
Oh, yeah,
I still haven't seen Cabin in the Woods.
You know, what?
What? It's on my list.
You need to prioritize that one. It's really good.
Listen, guys, I wanted to tell you about this. I am on a mission right now because I'm trying to get through all of Breaking Bad. But here's the thing: Breaking Bad is fucking depressing. So I'm doing a strategy in order to prevent me from killing myself. So what I'm doing is I'm watching an entire season of Breaking Bad, and then once that's over, I watch an entire season of Transformers Prime. So that way, I get depressing and then sci-fi fantasy. Depressing, sci-fi fantasy. So I got a really nice, well-balanced entertainment excursion. So that's what I'm doing right now. It's really fucking with my psyche.
So basically,
Walter White's Descent into Hell. Optimus Prime fights Megatron.
The thing with that is, so it's basically your mind is kind of being forged like a sword with the fires of Breaking Bad and the sweet cooling waters of Transformers. So,
right.
Yeah, your mind is... Are you fashioning your mind into a subconscious weapon?
I'm just trying to make sure I don't kill myself from how depressing Breaking Bad is.
It's not that depressing.
I haven't seen it.
It's pretty fucking depressing.
It's realistic.
No, but
shit
that's
happens like that every day.
It's real.
What season are you in?
It's real.
What season are you in, Bill?
I'm halfway through 2.
Okay, you haven't even seen children die yet, so...
No, but I saw the meth head parents and the kids, so that was fucked up.
That's a good one. I like that one.
Yeah, oh, that's a great episode. But that was where I was like, fuck, life sucks.
Yeah.
Anyway, different kind of
let's get back to the looks of we're talking about different kinds of monsters and originality recently. I mean, yeah, I'd posit Freddy Krueger. I mean, you can say he's based off this, he's based off that, but ultimately he is his own thing.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Oh, totally.
Once you get to what Freddy Krueger is, you can say he's derivative of other monsters, but he's clearly his own thing at the end of the day.
He rises. He's more than the sum of his parts. He rises from his influences to become his own thing.
Japan's doing a lot of weird things with monsters, and I don't know if it's good.
The thing with Japan is that they come.
They're too perverted for their own good. They're trying to make scary things that a bunch of Japanese guys are just jerking off to.
You don't understand. You don't understand. The thing is, the Japanese monster comes from a whole new perspective of fear, and that's the thing. Sure, that's the thing. Cultural monsters, especially in the East, I love how in different cultures, different monsters kind of arise, and like for them, our monsters seem kind of creepy because they're kind of used to their kappas and their revenge, creepy grudge ghosts. For them, that's kind of like Dracula. But they come to the West and they see Dracula. It's a scary nobleman that will eat your face. That is scary. But
that's your Japanese accent, by the way.
I don't know. I don't know how they sound. But that's the thing. I love when different cultures get present a monster from their perspective of a different. Like, for example, there's an Eastern director, and he shows you his own Eastern perspective on a Western style monster, and to see the same happening in reverse with a Western director showing his view of an Eastern type of monster. It's rather fascinating. I love the way. I love when that happens because, especially in the new Metal Gear Solid game, I know this has nothing to do with monsters, but that's what I really like because it's the East's view of American military movies and games and whatever, and it's something familiar, but it's at the same time it's extremely almost refreshingly different, except you're seeing the same thing you've seen all the time, except it's shot and it's seen from a whole new, more globalist perspective. And that's
I do like to see when when pop culture bleeds into other cultures. It's always really fascinating to me.
Totally.
I mean, I recently was just watching. I don't know why I saw this song. I heard this song in a YouTube video. It's just playing up the background, and I really liked it. So I decided to look up the name of the artist and the band, and it was actually "That's Not My Name" by the Ting Tings. There's a music video of it, so I watched the music video, and it's just a white girl and a white guy, and they're playing instruments, and she's dancing around and stuff. But it is so overwhelmingly Japanese. It's just shot all on white, and there's like glowing drums and stuff, and it's a very Japanese style of shooting things. And it like seriously, I honestly, listening to the song, I thought it was a Japanese girl singing it. Because even the way she made her voice sound, it sounded similar. So it's really fascinating to see cultures bleed into each other like that.
Yeah.
There's a really fun line in Scott Pilgrim that
Oh God, Scott Pilgrim is a perfect example.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's like basically why Japanese nerds and why Japanese geeks and and Japanese where Western geeks and Japanese otakus marry each other because they think each of them will give their child superpowers. It's like, I will marry this white man and he will become a knight and Arthur and whatever. And like, I'm a white person, I'll marry this Japanese chick and he'll be a ninja. He'll be a ninja knight.
Right. I mean, it's always, of course we had a big recent example of different cultural kinds of monsters bleeding into each other with Pacific Rim being basically an American-made kaiju film. And it's interesting because the Japanese started it, because if you look at a couple of different Toho movies from the mid-'60s. They took American monsters and did them as Godzilla-style monster movies. You had King Kong Escapes and you had Frankenstein Conquers the World. And in both cases, King Kong Escapes not so much, but even still, they changed them so dramatically much, and they turned them into the distinction between kaiju and monster. You know, in King Kong Escapes, you've got King Kong fighting a giant mechanical version of himself, and King Kong destroying a city. And then you go to Frankenstein Conquers the World, and they have, you know, a giant monster version of Frankenstein's monster, and he's fighting a giant dinosaur, and he's born of nuclear radiation. And I always love to see those different takes on these these icons, especially Frankenstein Conquers the World. Not a great movie, but a really good idea and a really great first 20 minutes. So that's one of my favorite examples of what you guys are talking about, because it's like really a giant monster version of Frankenstein where he's like nuclear and shit. That's awesome.
Yeah. Let's get back to something I started on earlier and we never really got into it. The looks of monsters, the visual aesthetics and the differences and similarities between them. It's no surprise that most monsters tend to look really dark. There's a lot of grays, a lot of blacks, a lot of muted color palettes.
Right.
That's probably a similarity that carries through most of them, unless you go like with South Park's Christmas Critters, which I always thought was brilliant.
Those things are just adorable. I love them. They're so cute.
I do love that one. That is like one of the most brilliant things. It's like, oh, they're adorable little Christmas critters. And then their eyes are glowing. That's odd. Wait, what are they doing? They're raping us! Oh my god!
Well, I think the interesting thing about a lot of monsters, and this goes for all classes of monsters, giant, human-sized, the supernatural, you can oftentimes, almost always point to a place in that culture's mythology where the current, producers got the idea from. You look back at Dracula, and Bram Stoker took a lot of different folk monsters and mixed them together to form his version of the vampire. It's funny because his version of Dracula is a lot more like a werewolf than a traditional vampire. And then you look at stuff, and then you look at the Wolfman, and a lot of vampire in what's that guy's name? Kurt Siodmak's Vision of a Werewolf, and a lot of bullshit mythology. But again, a werewolf is from real-life folklore. And then you go to something like the giant monsters. Look at Kong and Godzilla. Kong is based on these legends of giant gorillas in Africa. And, I'm here.
Oh, cool.
Marion C. Cooper decided to make an American-produced film out of that and use that to create this icon. And then Godzilla's a little rocky because a lot of people like to compare him to a dragon, but aside from the whole reptile thing, not a lot going on with the dragon.
It's a reptile that breathes, quote-unquote, fire.
Well, yeah, and that's where the comparison comes in, but it didn't come from dragons because Ishiro Honda was just like, we need something to show what radiation looks like. How about some kind of beam? So that's where that comes from. But, you look at photos of Godzilla from the front, especially the fursuit, and you're like, that looks a lot like a fucking dragon. But it looks a lot more like a Western-style dragon, which is interesting. Because, Eastern-style dragons are a lot more graceful and majestic and, these wise creatures.
Yeah, like Shenron.
Right, exactly, like Shenron. And then you go to something like fucking Purunga, who's like this jacked badass. Again, a lot more of a Western-style dragon who, has physical definition as opposed to this great wise being. And seeing what Godzilla is a metaphor for, being a weapon created by the West, it's interesting, even though it's entirely coincidental that he looks more like a Western-style dragon. But again, that's just the point I'm trying to make, is that you can see a lot of influences from mythology in these creatures. Even today to a certain extent, like we pointed out Freddy Krueger before. And
I mean, he has Japanese elements. I think that the Japanese are just incredibly good at creating the premise for monsters, but they're really shitty at executing them because they just... I don't know what it is. The Japanese have very poor understanding of plot, it seems, sometimes. Plot, execution, character development.
Mm.
But when the West gets a hold of the concept, it tends to really take off. I didn't love The Ring, but I think that movie worked.
I don't know if I agree with you, but I see
the thing with Eastern storytelling, I guess the focus is on different things. I guess it's just you're not really used to. I think you're a little bit too used to traditional storytelling techniques.
Well, no,
but,
I mean, I have no problem with non-traditional storytelling. It's just Japanese storytelling tends to go all over the place because it doesn't have a focus point. And I don't know how you tell a story without a focus point.
Well, it's not that there isn't a focus point. They just stray away from it a lot more than Western-style films do. They kind of go all over the place. It's kind of the film equivalent of one of Milan's tangents.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, and that's problematic. You'd have to agree.
Depending on context.
It might be entertaining from time to time, but it certainly isn't productive.
That's a good metaphor.
Thank you.
Well, no, it's just I don't mind non-traditional storytelling. I don't mind non-linear storytelling. I love Nolan's movies because I have no problem following multiple plot threads. I don't usually have a problem following what's going on in a Japanese movie. I might get a little lost because I spend more time reading the credits or reading the subtitles than being able to look at what's on screen. But still, there's just something wrong with what they're showing on screen at points, it seems. I don't know. It's either that or some of the stuff's just really cliche or really hackney, and it bothers me.
I do not share this problem.
I haven't seen a lot of it because I haven't really seeked it out. Just from what I've experienced, it's usually kind of chopped together poorly.
Well, in terms of monster movies, I think that a lot of cases going all over the place can be a really good thing because in terms of a giant monster, you look at something like Godzilla, and what makes the first movie work really well as kind of taking this insane situation and looking at the reaction of it, going all over the place kind of works because it allows the idea to really spread its wings and say, all right, how do these different aspects of society react to this insane situation, and how do we deal with this problem? What are the different reactions to it? And I actually wish Western monster movies would take that from Japanese films. I think that the problem a lot of Western monster movies have is they become really boring and hackneyed because they focus on the same tired cliches. You look at 50s monster movies, like stuff like Tarantula and The Deadly Mantis. It's always got to be a military guy. It's always got to be a scientist. It's always got to be a cop. And we never get to see the full widespread effects of this insane idea because they're so focused on this cliched hero character. And I find it a lot more interesting to be like, all right, how's the government dealing with this problem? How is the cabinet dealing with this problem? How are the fishermen dealing with this problem? All this different stuff. As opposed to the cop, working with the scientist to try and kill the monster. I think that that's something that Western monster movies can learn from Japanese films.
The thing with monsters is that if your hero can fight back in some sense, then it becomes an action movie. The thing with horror is essentially your hero has to be powerless in a sense against this huge looming threat because then the audience gets sucked in and they can kind of put themselves in the shoes of this character who just has nothing. He can shoot the thing with a gun, he can stab it, he can put it on fire. But the thing is with that is he can do that, but the scarier part is where he doesn't have the resources. Like, for example, Alien. Alien is basically a scary movie because you're kind of trapped on this ship and you're trying to get rid of this, hostile organism. But you can't because it's just nothing you do has any effect on it, and essentially.
See, here's my question in Alien: why didn't everybody seal themselves into one room and then turn off the oxygen in the rest of the ship?
Because the creature doesn't need oxygen to breathe.
Really? It seemed to do fairly bad once it got out into, open space.
I mean,
it's because of decompression.
When did they say it didn't need oxygen?
They say it in Aliens, if I'm not mistaken. But that's not what kills it. It gets blown out of an airlock, and it's just the pressure that kills it, not the lack of oxygen.
Well, I could have sworn they didn't, I just watched it a couple weeks ago for the show, even though I wasn't supposed to, and I could have sworn they totally said that it needed oxygen.
Well, Ian, consider the fact that, that ship is out there on a planet with no oxygen on it, and it's surviving.
Yeah, I mean...
It was in an egg.
So?
So it's an egg.
So?
So it's an egg.
It seemed like the thing with the alien.
Eggs of chickens need oxygen.
The thing with the egg. I mean, the thing with the alien, it manages to survive in the most hostile environments. I'm not saying it's just going to float through space completely alive, but...
That's the movie I want to see. Just the alien floating around space, tapping on spaceship windows, just like, let me in, please, it's really cold out here.
Like George Clooney in Gravity. God, that scene... No, that scene is just so fucking insane, because it's like, okay... This is where she dies. Here's the end of the movie. Getting ready for credits. And all of a sudden, it's just George Clooney. What? How did that happen?
Thanks for spoiling the movie for me, asshole.
No, I really didn't spoil it.
Okay, never mind. But that's the thing. I mean, it's kind of impractical with your plan. I mean, you're floating in space in a ship that I don't know if it has a finite amount of oxygen, but if you just basically get rid of all the oxygen in the ship instead of one room.
Cut off all the oxygen. Just make it stop distributing.
Well, why can't it just break through the walls into a place that has oxygen?
No, I'm saying lock off every room except for one. It just seems like a more practical way about it. I mean, that's the first thing I would have tried.
Because you would have survived the first,
Alien. Here's the thing. Andrew and I are very big horror movie fans, but we're also not white. And we always know how to survive a horror movie. One, if it's an option, fucking leave. Two, I never get that. Why do they always stay?
Because you know why? Because the white man wants to explore. If it wasn't
That's why, Ian. Yeah. It's all the white man's fault.
No, it's not the white man. The white man has it. No, let me explain to you why the white man is white. It never runs away. The white man doesn't run away.
Jebediah Springsteen on the white man's burden.
The white man has the spirit of...
That would be amazing.
Shut up. The white man has the spirit of exploration in him. If the white man just decided to stay in Europe and not branch out into other places, things like, I don't know, we wouldn't have
genocide.
Exactly. See?
You see what you would lose, Ian?
Exactly. I mean, the world wouldn't...
People would be lost?
Yeah, who knows? Maybe...
No, I'm just saying, it just always kills me. They just always fucking stay in the same place, and they don't ever leave.
What were we talking about
in a situation like Alien, they try to hunt the thing down. I'm just like, why wouldn't you even at least try just, locking it off?
Well, maybe,
you get your crew somewhere where they'll be safe, you cut off oxygen to the ship, and you're good.
Well, also,
I mean, they're scientists. They want to explore this thing. I mean, what the fuck
that's the other thing is, if they had suggested that, Ash would have been like, fuck no. But, I mean, the other thing is we don't know whether or not the ship was capable. I don't know. It's a viable... But it's not mentioned in the movies.
Who makes a spaceship where you can't cut off oxygen to rooms?
Why would you do that?
A very big deal.
Ian, who's making the spaceship is my first question. No,
I mean, if you're gonna make a spaceship, you need to be able to cut. If you're gonna make a giant space station, you're gonna need to be able to cut off the flow of oxygen to different areas. Because if there's a fire, you know how you kill it in space? You stop feeding it oxygen.
Well, then, Ian, what would the firemen do in space?
there are no space firemen.
You know what?
Oh,
So that
screw
sounds
you.
like something
Transformers,
out of
My-
that's different.
My uncle is a proud space fireman.
Jebediah Springsteen, space fireman.
Oh my god! But that's
No,
the thing. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, with this whole idea of why don't they just run away? I mean, if you're trapped in a cabin in the woods and terrible things are happening outside, then you're kind of locked off from the exit. The
Well, I mean,
things
they
are
don't-
Cabin in
outside.
the Woods was good. Cabin in the Woods was good. They tried to leave and they saw they couldn't. That was fine. That was understandable. But like other movies, I'm just like, guys, why aren't you getting the fuck out?
Well, usually
because,
they
because
entirely-
they're men.
Like what's the one movie? What's the one movie that came out just recently with the shark that was in a lake and the teenagers were like in a
Shark Night 3D.
Yeah, I'm just like, why would you stay?
No, they
What
explain
force
it.
on Earth could possibly compel you to stay? It's a pond. It is not like you are out in the middle of an ocean on a boat.
No, they come up with a bullshit reason to explain why they stay. I don't remember, but there was a whole scene devoted to why they couldn't fucking leave.
Why?
Well, oh wait. All right, so first
I don't remember.
No, I don't, but I don't remember the specific. I think their boat blew up, and then this hick shows up in like one of those old beat up like river cruisers. Then he picks them up, and he picks up some of them and take them to the hospital. Someone they decide to stay for some reason, but they did explain it. But it's always bullshit. I'm not saying you're wrong. It's always
I'm just
like
saying,
this
one
horseshit,
person
like,
gets
really?
bit by a shark. One person gets bit by a shark in a pond or a lake or whatever. I'm getting the fuck out. You
Yeah,
can't
I mean-
pay me to stay.
Yeah.
I mean, like, one, I'm not going in the fucking water anyway. I'd be fine.
But I mean, well, you don't know there's going to be sharks in there. I mean, that's the whole thing.
It's a fucking
No, but I mean,
pond.
one person
it's
gets
like,
bit by a
hey,
shark.
It's a pond.
Bill, if you're on a beach and there's a shark bite, are you going to go back into the water within the next hour?
No, but they don't.
I'm just saying, within the next day.
No, it's like, oh no, this is how movies work. Horror movies. There's this group of teenagers, and they go off into some undisclosed, far-off rural location in the woods or in the sea or whatever, and they just party
Okay,
and have
our
sex.
backlot.
Shut up! Let me explain this. I will rape your face.
No, you won't.
They lovingly, I'll do it lovingly, but yeah, they go to this rural location. And then a monster shows up, or a man with a machete that happens not to die. And yes, and then one of them or two of them gets killed, and they stay in the cabin. And the next day, they go, hey, it's morning, let's go outside and swim in the lake. But you know, there's a shark in the lake. Well, you know, it's gone now. How do you know? Jesus, let's go.
This is actually a really funny experience for me because it actually does really show a fundamental racial divide here. So we were writing a horror movie a number of years ago, and the premise was in the first couple of minutes there was going to be a house party, and a killer was going to come down and kill everybody in the house except for two people that happened to get away. And like. So my premise was, alright, these two get away, but they're high, so they don't want to call the cops, so they go back into the house to try to kill the guy themselves. And my friend Nick, who was trying to co-write it with me, goes, no. They should leave, go get some more friends, and then they should all come back. And I'm like, no, we should just have more people survive then. It's like, no, they should all come back. I'm like, Nick, no one in their right mind is going to go back to a house once they've gotten far enough away, and damn sure no one's going to bring other people. No one's going to go with them.
Right.
The thing with to
Like,
solve
it's just
that
such
problem.
it was such a deep racial divide there. Nick is as white as you can get.
The thing
Let's
with
go
that
kill
is,
that serial killer, boys! Woo!
the thing with that is, to solve that problem for a Russian guy. A Russian guy is the closest thing to a black poor person that anyone can get. Like
Except
black
for a
people.
black poor person.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like,
That's the only other
Poor
exception.
Russian poor people just don't want to be bothered. They're just like, I just don't want to be bothered. I'm just gonna sit here and drink and look at this wall angrily. And
Juan, you should really watch some of Archer because he has some there's the scene where he's in Russia, and it's just the greatest thing ever because it's just such a shitty. They just make Russia look like such a just pile of shit. It's so ridiculous. He's walking down a hallway in an apartment complex, and the floors are just covered in pieces of broken glass. It's like, the fuck is this? And like, he goes up onto a roof.
It reminds me of home.
Oh, yeah.
He goes up onto a roof to get away from the KGB, and he's like, God damn it, why is there broken glass up here too? And it's just the camera pans over, and they're just kids throwing empty bottles of vodka onto the ground for fun.
Well, that's the thing, there's no more KGB. What the fuck? Oh, but anyway, the Russian people, this is how a Russian guy would deal with a serial killer. Let's just say Jason comes into a Russian apartment building. Nobody will like he knocks on the door, doom, 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 open the door. Russian guy, old little Russian lady, looks through the keyhole and says no, and just doesn't open the door. And that's the end. He'll just knock.
That's the whole movie?
No, okay, now let me tell you what happens.
It's just Jason walking through this Russian apartment building, knocking on doors, wanting to come in, and Russian people just don't let him in. And that's the movie. That's the movie.
Now, I love how Jason's like a vampire. He needs to be invited in. He can't just break down the door.
You cannot get a Russian door, man. I went back to like a couple of years ago to Moscow where I lived as a kid, and the doors are fucking iron. They're like blast proof. You need a fucking nuclear weapon to get past those.
So Jason goes to the nearest Russian dump and he grabs a nuclear missile.
Because people just toss those out.
I mean, it's Russia, so I mean, it's gotta be a thing, right? You just go to a local dump. You're like, hey, Papa, I found myself another nuclear missile. Good, we bring it together.
Put it on the pile with the others.
We'll go sell it for half price to the Arabs. Let's go.
Oh, God.
It's funny because it's exactly what's going to happen. Right?
What? Yeah, the Islamic people and Russian nuclear armament trade it's what holds our community together, man.
Right?
Don't knock it. Yeah.
This is the social glue of America.
See, let me explain the system of trade here for those that don't know. All right, so the Russian people sell their leftover nuclear arsenal to the Islamic areas, and the Islamists sell them back buckets of sand. So you see, because Russia is so landlocked, and the parts of the country that are connected to water are just completely icy and snowy, the Russians have never actually seen sand before. So it's kind of like the American Indians and the U.S. back in the day when they would sell great spans of land for beads. It's like this intricate thing. They don't really know the value of it. It's just so exotic that they really want it.
Whoa, American.
Once again,
Native
back
American?
to genocide.
Whoa, stop. So the Native Americans sold their land off for beads? What?
Well, the Native Americans didn't understand the concept of owning land.
They were like, we just live here, guys. We don't own anything.
Yeah, I mean, see, it's just, when you really think about it, it's a really weird concept to say you own this piece of land.
Right.
I mean, it's like, it's there before you, it'll be there after you.
Right.
How can you fucking own it?
Right, the Indians are just like,
well, I'm going to build a house
here.
I mean,
that doesn't fucking matter.
Yeah, I know. But
the house
that's
will
the
burn
weird thing.
down.
Yeah,
eventually.
I know, but still, it's like I want to live here and like raise children. Can I do that?
Well, no, the Indians understood territory, but they didn't understand the concept of owning land. And the thing is, territory would fluctuate. So it's just a very strange concept to them. So basically, the white people were saying, hey, we'll give you these beads if you let us just hang out here for a while. And they're like, that's cool.
Because they're just like, why not? We're getting it for free.
Getting some beads, man. We're gonna wear.
I just like to think that Native American guy was like this, like the dumb stoner of the group, and he ran back just like, guys, I got some beads. And they're just...
Yeah, I mean, the most infamous example is the Native Americans sold the land that is now known as the Grand Canyon to the West for basically a treasure chest that in modern day numbers is probably worth maybe $500.
Wow.
Damn, that...
I wonder if I can get it for that these days.
That is just like... That's silliness. Why would they do that?
Well, they didn't know what they were doing.
One's judging Native Americans because they didn't know what
I'm
land
gonna judge
ownership
them. It's
was.
just like, I mean...
Or,
like,
no, it's kind of like when you ask a kid, like, how much money do you want? Or, like, how much money do you think that costs? And they say, like, $100. They don't know what $100 is yet. They have no conception of it.
Right. Well, I'm just like, you fucking dumbass. He's judging them and shit.
In Soviet Russia, we would at least got a woman out of the deal. I will sell you this giant patch of land for your sister. It is good. She will bear me healthy children.
So now...
This is my sister. This is Kishna. Kisses her. She is my sister. Is number 2 prostitute in all of Kazakhstan. Very proud.
Oh my god.
Borat has some really good moments.
Oh my god, Borat.
We spend money on clock radio, can never afford. Great success.
Oh, dude. My mom was gonna hate me for telling this story, but basically.
Did she listen to the show?
No, but the thing about Borat's wife, her name's Oksana, and that's my mom's name. And basically, me and her was sitting watching the movie on the plane to Moscow, and or sometime I don't remember. And she's just laughing at the first part of the movie with, you know, Oksana being this horrible fat white Russian, this whatever Eastern European woman. And then when a guy comes up to Borat later on in the movie, he's like, "Your wife has been raped by a bear, then killed." And she's like, "Oh, I'm gonna sue this motherfucker." And then like, oh my god, oh, and it's hysterical.
No, I really do like parts of Borat. I really lose interest round about the time a naked obese man runs on screen.
Yeah, then you're just like, I don't want no part of this anymore.
Oh, I don't know what you're talking about.
Don't lie though, a really good one. I mean, it's not as good as it could have been, but it's really like a 75% movie. Go watch The Dictator. Because it has its moments. If you're a politics fan, it really has its moments. I think my favorite part is when he's speaking to essentially the United Nations, and he says that, like, why are you so against dictatorships? Think about it, America. If you were a dictatorship, then 99% of the people could do all the work, and 1% of the population could have all the wealth. And he starts making, like, all these great points like that. The media could be controlled by the state.
And we're just like, that's exactly how it works.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. It was a good movie. I enjoyed parts of it. The problem is it got into Sacha Baron Cohen's, like, you know, crude, like, toilet humor. And, I mean, that's fine. If you like toilet humor, whatever. I don't care. It's okay from time to time, but it was such a much funnier movie when it was focused on, like, the politics and
at
stuff.
that point, it's just trying to be a popcorn movie as opposed to being this funny satire.
Yeah,
Well, like, the other part that really got me is he's having his scientists build a nuclear bomb.
As you do.
And, well, he's a dictator, so he wants a nuclear weapon.
Right.
So he goes in there to observe the nuclear weapon. It's kind of like the Fat Boy nuclear bomb, right?
Mm.
And he's like, well, this is good, but I want the tip to be pointy. And the head scientist is like, no, the tip doesn't need to be pointy. No, because when you launch the missile, it needs to stick in the ground in order to... I've been watching my test footage. It's like, now this test footage. was one of the subjects a duck, and when the bomb blew up, his bill went around the back of his head, and in order to talk, he had to move the bill to the front of his head again. Yes, that particular deformity was visible. Yeah, you've been watching cartoons.
Oh god, that's funny.
There's some really good parts in that one.
Oh, that's funny. Anyway, Monsters. Ask me something and I will tell you to it.
Okay. Milan, what is the scariest monster, non-Lovecraftian, that you think you've seen? Like, it presented in pop culture, not hallucinated in your waking hours.
He's like, I just lost 75% of my options.
That's actually true. The thing with,
Like, what's a good modern monster to you?
I don't...
Like, what's a good representation of a modern monster?
Modern monsters, that's the thing.
Okay.
Well, that too, but the thing with that, like, fantasy monsters, they've become more like popcorn fun for me. I like to design them and like draw them and watch them and whatever, but I don't get that sense of fear as I did as a kid. I mean, and I don't understand this whole terror about killer clowns. I mean, I come from Russia and I have circus in the family, and they are not scary people. They're like, hey, kid, he's out for a jam in your face. It is delightful happiness in dark times.
There's a really good story a friend of mine wrote. I've mentioned it a couple times. I even mentioned it when we did the horror episode. It's a really good story she wrote about chlorophobia, basically. And it was more of a hallucination of a clown. Just the way she talked about describing color, of just this sickeningly oversaturated color palette and these visions this girl was having. Really fascinating look at chlorophobia. So I do recommend reading that. I'll put a link in the description for anyone that's interested. One of the best uses of chlorophobia I've ever seen.
I just figured out the monster that I'm scared the most. I am terrified of vivisection. Just being
the Dr.
tight.
Moreau shit, nice.
Yeah, like that. Like I'm like reading Dr. Moreau. It's one of my favorite books, but at certain parts of it, he doesn't describe the surgeries at all. Well, he does a little bit, and the way he does, I'm terrified of a surgeon cutting into my thighs with a scalpel. Of just being. There's this really great scene in a book that I really like, by Derek Landy. It's in the Skullduggery series. There's this monster. It's basically this hideous spider-like devil surgeon thing, and it exists in a place that it's kind of this place where time isn't a thing, and people are in the state of death and living at once. So he's basically dissecting all these living people, and so when the main heroine goes into his like domain, into his lab as it were, she just sees parts of people still alive. They're dead and alive at the same time, since time doesn't exist in this place. And it's just heads and bodies, and the way Derek describes what she has to basically need this creature to do something, to have some sort of spell engraved on her chest or heart or whatever. And he kills her, but she doesn't die, since there's no death in this place.
Milan, you're having a really hard time getting through this one, because I'll
finish up. Basically, he dissects her while she's still alive, and it's this hideous, long-limbed surgeon thing without a nose and burnt face, just dissected this girl, cracking through her rib cage and cutting her skin, and she's still alive. And that's what terrifies me the most, just being in the hands of a terrifying surgeon.
Okay. Actually, believe it or not, my fear isn't being operated on. I mean, I've recently got through a surgery and I felt, relatively fine afterwards, physical recovery and all that. But, the one thing that can get me freaked out, like I'll actually feel myself start to get sweaty. I'll feel myself start to sweat and it gets hard to swallow and I just have a hard time, like I've almost passed out once. Reading about surgery, especially when it gets really detailed and starts to happen in an emergency scenario. I remember I was reading this book, and it wasn't a horror novel. It was just kind of like a really interesting spin on a crime drama. This guy was a religious fanatic, and he was a serial killer. But they were doing some what's the word I want? Regular maintenance, regular checkup, whatever, on his blood. And they saw that he'd had cancer, but his white blood cells were actually killing the cancer. So this man's blood was defeating cancer. And that was a big deal, but he was slated for execution. And so the state allowed that they could remove some bone marrow and get a lot of blood samples, but they wouldn't stay as execution. So the doctor's getting the bone marrow and stuff, and that part's kind of putting me a little bit on edge, uneasy. But then it starts to describe him having an allergic reaction and all the steps she has to take in order to save his life at that moment. And oh my god, I was reading that in a math class in high school, and I had to close the book halfway through the chapter because I was about to just drop out of my desk.
Wow.
That one freaked the fuck out of me.
Yeah, basically that's exactly what I have, just a fear of surgery. Also, I am terrified of being lobotomized. I don't know.
Well, that's a reasonable fear for you, because that's something that, Milan, if you were born 40, 50 years ago, and you experienced the stuff you did at, your 12, 13-year-old age, that likely would have happened to you.
Yeah, that or become...
Cut out your brain, you maniac!
That's the thing. That either I would be lobotomized, or I would become, a priest or something. Or hey, the priest would take me away to the mountains and say, he will tell us things. And I'm like, okay, I see terrible
That
things.
is such a sad thing.
I want to join this religion that Milan is describing, because it does not sound like one that I'm familiar
The
with.
Russian
actually
Orthodox
quite right.
Church. Yay.
No, he's actually quite right. I mean,
Oh.
it's something that happened big time that, the Greek oracle, it was probably just some poor bastard that had schizophrenia, and then they'd put him in a goddamn cave where they'd just breathe in all these fucking fumes and it'd slowly poison him and give him even worse hallucinations, and then the fucker would say shit, and the king would get pissed off if it led to a loss in the battlefield, and then, this happened multiple times, the fucking king's army would storm the goddamn oracle's temple and kill the fucker for being wrong.
Yeah.
It's really quite sad.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's one more little thing that kind of about this whole mental illness thing. I don't know if I've told this story before, but when I was in summer camp one day, I told this priest about all my hallucinations, and the guy started crying, sincerely crying, and he said, "Milan, come to the mountains with me. I want you to paint holy icons," because he says only a very few people have the gift of the sight. And when I became atheist, I really kind of I hated him because he lied to me, not knowingly, with tears in his eyes. But then, as I kept continuing to think about it, I couldn't hate the man. I couldn't hate any priest. It's just because not this particular priest. It's just this man was just a guy who never got out of the cult. And I couldn't hate him anymore because this was a really sweet, kind, loving man who, sure, his reaction might have, set me back a little in my recovery, but still, he believed in what was going on. And he was sincerely jealous about my ability to, quote-unquote, see into the beyond. And,
yeah.
And that's the thing. There's also another guy that I was really fond of, the librarian, who was a Greek paganist, that filled my mind with a lot of insane bullshit. some of it was useful. Other times it just worsened my condition to no end. And so I just have this, like, I had these two men, like the priest and the pagan on each shoulder, both men in black with large black beards, whispering.
And one was wearing little devil horns, and one had a halo.
No,
and they were like, Milan, steal the candy bar. No, Milan, don't steal the candy bar.
No, they were both crows on my shoulder telling lies.
They were jumping too.
Okay, but let's get back to monsters and wrap up on this. Is there anything in particular you guys wanted to mention? Because, I mean, I kind of wanted to get
to answer the question.
About, like, the look of monsters,
no,
or what?
I didn't get to say what I'm afraid of.
Oh, sure, go ahead.
I mean, my biggest fear has always been of two things, and they're kind of interconnected. One being deep, open water. Terrified of that. And
wonder why.
Wait, what?
Wonder why.
No, I remember going to a SeaWorld knockoff in Canada once as a kid, called Marineland. And I remember going, and they had orcas and shit. I remember going to the orca tank and looking in and seeing how deep it was, and my dad was joking about throwing me in, and it freaked me out, because it's like a 35-foot tank.
Okay.
So I was like freaked out. But in terms of monsters that I've always been afraid of, I've always, in terms of, because Godzilla's my favorite monster. Never really been afraid of Godzilla though. However, definitely the monster that I've seen the most films where I had feared the creature. Definitely werewolves. The scariest movie I had ever seen until I started rewatching it too many times was An American Werewolf in London. There are some terrifying scenes in that movie.
Oh, yeah.
And on a first time viewing, it's terrifying, just because of the different scares they go for. They go for jump scares, they go for atmosphere, they go for this weird, like, distance thing where their howls get progressively louder and stuff. It's just a really well done horror film. But werewolves have always been the ones I've been the most terrified of. And you know what I think the reason is? All these monsters we've mentioned, you have to be in a certain place in order for you to be near enough to these monsters in order for them to hurt you. And I suppose the same thing can be said for werewolves, but a werewolf, if they were real, could be anybody. So if you're sitting in your little suburban town, and at night you start hearing howls, some motherfucker could turn into a werewolf, barge into your house, and rip you apart. And as a kid, that was something that always freaked me out about werewolves. So that werewolves were my terrifying icons of horror. So it's not surprising my first horror movie was a werewolf movie.
Interesting. I think that's a pretty good place to wrap up. Was there anything else any of you wanted to really get out, or are we all good?
I want to say something. Everyone, I bless you all in the name of Cthulhu. You have my blessings. May your futures be dark and dreary, since it doesn't really matter since he's coming back, and all of humankind will be burnt away from the surface of the earth, and the earth itself will be pulled into a dark parallel dimension filled with chaos and darkness, and those who survive will scream and be finally free to revel in a holocaust of terror and violence, while eventually being consumed and exterminated by the old ones. So remember. And by the way, this is an announcement. There's a bake sale on at the Bloodstone Church in Innsmouth, right. So come along.
We'll have fresh cookies.
We have fresh cookies. We're all looking for new members. If you happen to find fish sexually attractive.
Warning, disclaimer: the cookies may or may not be poisoned with colors out of space.
Oh, totally. Totally. But yeah, if you happen to be sexually attracted to fish, we have a couple of girls here that really sweet, old religion type girls. They're really quite good.
And by the way, warning: seafood may not be served due to the offense taken by some of our members.
Oh yeah, because in Innsmouth, seafood eats you. Ha!
So I think that's a good place to wrap up.
I think so too. All right.
I fucking love Halloween. Just want to say that.
Oh, me too.
Yeah.
By the way, one more
My
little
favorite
plug.
holiday.
Okay, one more thing. Go out and watch my Milan Jeftik's Halloween Spooktacular. Go watch it, and something sexual will happen in your future.
Also, be sure to check out the Sons of Sarazawa podcast's Halloween Spectacular, coming this Sunday, or this next Sunday rather, on my channel. It's going to be fun.
Wow, Bill, really enthusiastic plug there.
I'm sorry, I'm tired. I'm actually really excited for that because I got some cool ideas to do on that show.
Anyway,
all right.
yeah.
And I'm gonna plug some stuff too. Everybody, here's the real announcement that you've all been waiting for. Coming soon. We're coming up on it quickly here. It's the Geeky Gentleman 100th episode. We're going to be doing a live show. We're going to have some special guests. We're going to announce a date. Or this video is being recorded before we've had a chance to talk dates exactly, but we're going to announce a date in the future, or maybe we've already announced it. Who knows?
Right, because we're recording this well in advance of it being posted.
Yeah. Sorry, it seemed like a good idea. But yeah, everybody, so, get ready for that. That'll be fun. It'll be a live show. There'll be antics. There'll be prizes. Probably not. No. We don't have enough money to give you shit.
No.
Don't
Actually, yes, there will be a prize, because I will be drawing you if you win.
Oh, okay. That's cool. There will be an intangible prize. You'll get a prize in the form of a picture of yourself.
You arrogant, self-indulgent fucks.
Indeed.
Bill, really, I'm trying to plug the show here, and
they love it when I call them names.
Yes, they find
Okay.
it.
Sign of affection.
Our audience is obviously masochists.
They're narcissistic
Okay.
masochists.
Okay, anyway, everybody, so yeah, look out for the Geeky Gentleman 100th episode live.
You get to see us in suits. It's gonna be fucking awesome.
Funny enough, I'm wearing a suit right now just because I was filming something earlier and I just didn't feel like getting out of it.
Sweaty ass work uniform, and I will end this video on that image in your heads.
And I'm in my underwear.
I'm looking swank in a suit, so I'm the only one of us here that's really knows what it's all about.
And I am.
Everybody,
everyone, Aaron, I'm in a.
Who knows what the meaning of life is?
Milan, we know what you're in. We don't want to hear about it. All right, everybody. Thank you for listening to this week's episode, or this special episode, of Geeky Gentleman. Yeah. And until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
I'm the Fanatic.
And I am the Madman.
And we are your Geeky Gentlemen, and we will be discussing things that involve monsters.